We're sisters, best friends, and authors on a mission to help you stoke your creative fire and live the life of your dreams. We believe that purpose fuels passion and that creativity is your secret weapon for mass construction. There's never been a better time to bless the world with your dream realized. You're listening to The Kate and Abbie Show.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Kate and Abbie Show. Have you ever started a book that you're super passionate about? You're embarking on a story, the story of your dreams, this amazing idea that you've had and you've formulated in your head, and now you are writing the book. You're actually setting out on the journey and things go great for a while. You're super excited, and then slowly you, either through feeling like you have writer's block or falling into a creative rut, things just slow down and you can't quite seem to find the finish line. You can't see the finish line in the distance anymore. It is out of sight and you're wondering, how did I get to this lost, confused place where I no longer feel any motivation to finish this book? If that is you, you've come to the right place, because a lot of us have felt that way. I think most writers have at some time or another started a writing project that they're having now a hard time finishing, and we're all in it together. We've all been there. We've done that. That's what we're breaking down today on this episode. But first,
we have to thank our sponsors, who are you. That's right. You guys are the ones who support this podcast and keep it going. So if you get value out of this show, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show and help us keep this podcast alive and free of interruptions. So let's dig into it. How to actually finish your book. This is something I think a lot of writers struggle with, because I see that question a lot. Like, I've lost motivation. How do I finish it? Or it's like a running joke, like amongst writing memes of like, oh, I have all these books that I haven't finished, or the shiny new idea takes your attention and you don't finish the other thing that you were writing or working on. So it's a common struggle for sure. And I think there's a few like secret ingredients that aren't really secret. They're just like hidden in plain sight.
They're
simple.
Just ingredients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
nothing
they're
secret about
ingredients.
Simple ingredients
that will bring you to the finish line and help you to get that book finished, be able to type the words "the end" or whatever you write at the end, do a happy dance and be like, I did it, and be proud of yourself. And I think that's a good place to start, is considering this idea of what will I feel like when I do finish it, and going after that emotion, that sense of accomplishment and pride in your work. There's a lot to be said for that, I think.
Absolutely.
The feeling that I persevered, I had the grit to endure this, and I finished it. And if you never finish your project, you'll never experience that feeling. It's a really magical feeling.
Absolutely. It's a euphoric feeling to finish a book.
Yeah.
And I think having that image in your mind is important.
Yeah.
Have a vision board, have something, anything that reminds you of it. It doesn't even need to be a vision board. I don't think I've ever made a vision board, but I have this image in my mind of getting to the end. And maybe figure out something that you're going to do when you finish it. I've done that. Like, even if it's a simple thing, like, oh, I'm going to go out to my favorite restaurant with, someone you love to celebrate. Now it's like you have this little incentive, this little reward at the end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even if it's a small thing, it will still be this trigger of like, oh, that'll be really fun. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it has to be something that you can like immediately reward yourself, because just thinking about like someday it's going to be published and it's going to sit on my shelf, well, that might take a while. Even if you self-publish, it might take a while for it to like actually materialize sitting on your shelf. So that your reward can't be put off until then.
Exactly.
For sure.
And of course, finishing the book in and of itself is like already a lot of euphoria and just really special feeling. But having a celebration of some kind, I think, can be really important. And I'm starting to get better at that, because I've always been the type of person, this about me, that I never really would celebrate it that often. I'd be like, oh yeah, I finished a book, next topic. And you'd be like, you should really celebrate that more. And what I started seeing is, yes, I should. I should really mark those points better with a little more emphasis. And so I've done that more with even my audiobook process. Like when I signed my audiobook deal, I like had a little celebration when the first one came out. I celebrated that just with small things. It makes it more of a rewarding, yummy journey than just, oh, you know, get this done, check these boxes.
Right. Yeah.
So I think having a trigger, having something that when you think about it, it triggers happiness, feelings of joy. Right. And when you associate finishing your book with feelings of joy, that's always a, you know, benefit.
Yeah. It has to be a highlight, I think, in your life, you know. Even looking back at like the previous month, I always do like a journaling exercise at the end and beginning of each month where I like review the past month and then set goals for the next month. And I make a list of like highlights and accomplishments and things I'm proud of that I did in the previous month. And it's amazing how if I don't stop to make that list, it kind of just goes by and I don't really remember it a whole lot. Like, oh yeah, I did that. But I don't take like a moment. I have to like stop myself to take a moment to appreciate what I actually did and feel that sense of accomplishment and joy, really, of like, wow, that was really cool. Even if it wasn't something that I accomplished, even if it was just like a highlight of something really cool that happened, that even if I had no hand in like doing it, right. If it was just a cool thing that happened in my life, I think it's important to acknowledge those things. And so finishing your book is obviously a big highlight that can go on that list or a yearly list of accomplishments, because it's a big undertaking, right, to write a book. But at the end of the day, the best advice for finishing a book, for persevering on a book is that perseverance. Like it's not pretty advice. It's not like fun, easy, simple thing to do. It's just the act of having grit and persevering on something, which is not easy all the time. A lot of times you'll show up and you won't want to do the thing. I'm kind of like at this point. It's cool that we're talking about this because I'm kind of at this point experiencing the same thing with my writing life right now, because I've been working on a book for over a year, which is a long writing process for me. I don't usually take that long to write a book. I'm usually like 4 to 6 weeks and I'm done. I'm on to the next thing. So I'm a bit like divided with my attention usually on writing projects, because that's just what keeps me excited and animated about writing. So it's been taking a lot of grit for me to like stick with this writing project and see it through to the end. So I'm in like the home stretch of writing this, and I have a few more chapters left to write, and it has been a struggle. Like, I fully admit it's been a struggle sometimes to show up and write when I feel like I've been writing this forever and it's not done yet, and that just freaks me out sometimes. But it's like just the act of showing up and writing is actually the same as it was when you first started. Like you're doing the same thing. You're going through the same motions of like showing up with your ideas, opening your laptop and writing. But it feels different at the end than the beginning. And I think that's when you need more grit and more perseverance and endurance, because at the beginning you're kind of going on excitement and momentum. Right. But when you simplify it and think like, look at everything that I've done so far. Like, I've made it this far. I can make it to the end. You know, it's really the same thing that you've been doing. Like, you're fully capable of it. And I think a lot of writers don't acknowledge that. Like, I'm totally capable of doing this. It's not like some big feat to write the next few chapters or the end of this, because I wrote the whole beginning, you know?
Yeah, and realizing that the process is the same, even though it feels different, and it will feel different because you've gone through the full evolution of the book, but it's still the same. Write the next word. Yeah. You're not writing the rest of the book. You are writing the next word, and then the next word, and then the next word. And I know that sounds kind of like stoic, overly simplified advice, but it actually is that. And if you can get your brain into this meditative place of like slow down and don't worry about the entire ending of the book, just think about the next paragraph.
Yes.
That's such an important place, and that's what's going to help you. You know what I mean? It's like when you're cleaning a room. Like, have you ever experienced when it's like, oh, I'm going to tidy this room, or I'm going to do this cleaning project, and it's like maybe the room is like a mess, and you can, if you think about cleaning the whole room and how long it's going to take, you're like, you know, I can't even do this today.
Just want to cry.
I can't even handle this. But if it's just like, how about, you know, let's focus on a corner of the room. Like, I think of that book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, because she talks about this, how just take one piece of the room, take one drawer, start with one drawer, tidy the drawer, then tidy the next drawer, then tidy the surface of that desk over there. And you never look at it like, oh my gosh, I have to clean this whole room. It's going to take forever. That's how you need to look at your writing, is it's just, how can I make this next paragraph as great as I possibly can make it? And then ask yourself that with the next one.
Yeah.
And then the next one. And then pretty soon a chapter's over. And now, you know, another chapter. Now you're on the last chapter. And then the book is done.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's reverse engineer it so that you're not overwhelming yourself.
Yeah, because you literally can't be creative and like can't even think straight if you just overwhelm yourself. You know, it's like when you're in school and you would do math and like cover the whole page of problems with another piece of paper, because if you just look at all of the equations you have to do, it's like you want to just cry. So you just cover them up until, okay, one at a time. You can handle one at a time, but you can't handle like looking at everything all at once. And right. I live my daily life like that as well, with like task lists, and sometimes a to-do list is really long and daunting, and it's like, no, I'm not gonna think about that. Or the weekly to-do list is really long and daunting, and it's like, no, that's on my Trello board. I have like to do this week and then like to do today. So I only look at the today board. I only look at the today list. And that's the only way to work effectively. And when you're saying that, you said something about kind of a simple like stoic philosophy, and you probably saw me smile when you said the word stoic.
Yeah, I was wondering why you were like, you looked like you're about to laugh, and it was gonna make me start laughing.
No, I wasn't gonna laugh. I was just like, stoic is like that meme of like the heart beating. Okay. Right. Anyway, I'd written down on her face notes that
goes to heart eye emoji when she hears that word.
Yep. And I think it's a Stoic principle, but I can't remember like who originally said it. The phrase or the principle of chop wood, carry water. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
It's so funny that you say that, because that book right there that your cup is sitting on,
yeah.
I happened to open it the other day to a random spot, and it was on that paragraph.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even know that he talks about it. I got this book out because I wanted to read it.
That's so funny. Yeah, no, I just read that in there.
That's so funny.
And I didn't even know what it was. I'm like, oh, chop wood, carry water. That sounds like a good time. And then I closed the book. I don't even know what context it was in.
I was just going to have you explain it. Okay. So it's like, I believe it is the principle of like, you're only thinking about like the next thing. Like we were just saying, like, don't think about like the whole process. Just think, how can I do this next action really well, like to the best of my ability? Just chopping the wood or carrying the water, like a very simple, how can you break it down to the most simple thing and then do that simple thing with excellence? And I think that's a really like cool, wholesome way to do creativity. Yes. To be creative is to bring it down to not be like this big complex thing, but just to make it like very simple. Like, how can you simplify the complex and just take one simple step towards excellent creativity? And I don't even like to use the word excellent, because you shouldn't be like judging yourself too harshly on how creative you are or how good a sentence comes out or whatever. But if it like feels right, that to me is like the biggest tell. Is like, right. I have to feel good about what I just wrote in order to continue.
You feel like you're doing your best.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll know, I think, intrinsically. And some days it will come slowly, but even if you can write one line that you're really proud of, that you're like, it was worth showing up today and writing just for that one line. I've had a lot of days like that, and I'm proud of those writing days. Even if it's like, oh yeah, I have to edit the rest of it a lot because the rest of it wasn't that great, but that one line was just golden, then it was a good writing day.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. What you said about the chop wood, carry water philosophy reminded me of in the karate philosophy book I'm reading called The Path of Liberation. A paragraph, a quote from it stood out to me today when he said something along the lines of basically, if you're focused on an entire outcome and so fixated on the whole outcome, that's actually not as important as just focusing on you doing your personal best with whatever one thing you're doing right now, rather than what is going to be the entire result of this match or whatever. Obviously, you can apply that to anything in life. Right. And I thought that's so cool because that actually does matter more, because that's what's determining the outcome in the long term. But if you're just focused on that in the moment, you are not allowing yourself to act as well as you could if you weren't fixated on the outcome and were instead fully focused and here in this one action, because that's all you can do is one action at a time. Right. You can't do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all at the same time. You're just on one.
Yeah, and if you're thinking of 6 when you're doing 1, you're going to get messed up.
Exactly. So sometimes creatively we get way ahead of ourselves with the end of the book, how am I going to do, well, how are you going to do the next paragraph?
Right. Because that's what matters right now. And when the reader is reading it, that's what will matter to them while they're reading this part,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so true. And that is the key to doing excellent creative work, is being able to focus on the present moment, really, to be present and focusing on what are you doing right now, what is happening in this breath, not what is going to happen, in a couple minutes or a couple days or at the end, the last scene. And you can definitely outline and plot and think ahead. I do that all the time, but I try to after I outline, I try not to look ahead too much and instead just look more at, okay, what's the next thing I'm writing? And even if I want to even if I'm a little bit tempted to think about farther in or further in to the end, the very end, I will pull myself back and be like, no, you already outlined that. You don't have to think about it. It's there. It will be there for you when you reach that part, and you don't have to think about it. You don't have to stress about it. Just focus on what's happening right now.
Right.
Or what's the very next thing. And that has helped me to enjoy the moment and enjoy the process more. And to trust the process, as they say. That's always been a piece of advice that has never really resonated with me that much. Trust the process. That's why I'm like, what does that mean?
I love how you just gave that piece of advice and then admitted to everyone that piece of advice has never resonated with me.
Well, my point is that it's starting to.
Yes.
I think everybody has their own experience with receiving advice. Some of it will resonate, some of it won't, and it's not a good or bad thing. It just depends on your season of life and where you are. And I think that is the advice, trust the process, is finally starting to resonate with me a little bit, where I am currently in my process, in that it's about, for me currently, I'm kind of coming to the realization that I don't have to stress and worry and think too much about what's going to happen in the future, what I already did in the past. If you have a good system in place, something that works for you, that you can be confident in, that is your process. And that's different for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so learning to trust that, I think, for me anyway, comes with taking away or letting go of that obsessive control over worrying about the process and hoping that it's good enough. And it's you don't have to think about that. Like you can let go, you can relax, you can just relax and be creative. So it's an ongoing learning experience.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we put way too much stress on how we're doing something rather than just letting ourselves do it however we would normally do it. You know what I mean? Like, you see young kids do things so intuitively, just from this instinct that flows out of them to create and do things that they do. Like when you let a kid loose in the backyard and they're like, you know, making stuff out of like sticks and grass and leaves and, you know, inventing things, and it's like, whoa, that's so cool. And that's just, they're not like, oh, you know, is this the right way for me to like, you know, have this creative process? They're not thinking about that, and they're not like, well, I saw this YouTuber and the way they did it was like this, or, you know, this millionaire, their process for creativity is like this. Kids don't think like that. They're just like, what's fun for me right now? In fact, they don't even have that thought because it's so natural to them. So if we can revert back to some of that original creativity and inspiration that we had as kids, if we can hang on to that and if we can ground ourselves in that, I think that's really helpful. Yeah. To be a little more intuitive with your inner child, with your inner self, and what actually feels like a comfortable, natural process to you, and stop worrying about, you know, this person and that person's process, because everyone's unique, everyone's different, and your process should reflect that. Yeah,
100%. That is something that I've also been thinking about a lot, is like the excitement in creativity. But if the excitement isn't there, it's okay. And if you don't have motivation, you don't have the energy, you don't have the inspiration, that's okay. You can still be creative. I think that's a big misconception amongst writers, amongst artists in general, is that creativity is like this magical thing, which is something that Seth Godin talks about in this book that we were talking about earlier, The Practice, which I'm currently reading, and it's really good, and just like good little bite-sized pieces of inspiration and insight. And one of the passages that I highlighted to read on this episode is about how creativity is an action, not a feeling, and that it doesn't have to be always like this wave of inspiration that hits you and now you're like creating out of that inspiration. So I'm gonna just read the quote and then talk. We can't always do much about how we feel, particularly when it's about something important, but we can always control our actions. Your work is too important to be left to how you feel today. On the other hand, committing to an action can change how we feel. If we act as though we trust the process and do the work, then the feelings will follow. Waiting for a feeling is a luxury we don't have time for. I thought that is so true, and it's like harsh creative advice, but it is so true, because so many people, so many writers wait to feel inspired. Wait for like the magical muse to come and sprinkle muse fairy dust on them so that they feel motivated to finish the book. That might not happen. I love this idea that creativity is an action, not just a feeling that happens to you. Because acting upon creativity makes you create, but the act of creating is creativity.
Yes.
So it can happen both ways. It doesn't have to be like first this, then that. It can be first I act and then the feelings follow. You know, and I think that's where courage comes in, where you have to take that first step, take those steps forward and trust that the staircase will be there for you.
Right.
You know, you're not going to fall off into the abyss. You might be surprised by how much you didn't even know you were capable of, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes too, especially if you've been in a little bit of a rut and haven't written in a while, those happy feelings you associate with writing will come back once you start writing. You know what I mean? It's just like, if you haven't worked out in a long time and you're like, oh, you know, I'm not as flexible, I don't feel as strong. Well, guess what? You'll start feeling that once you start doing it. But you have to like start doing that first, and then those feelings of strength and flexibility come as you do it. Same with mental stuff. It's just those muscles, those neurons wiring and firing haven't done that in a little while. Right. And I think, like you were saying, having the courage to step into it, regardless of whether you feel ready, can help to create those emotions rather than waiting for those emotions to push you forward into creating.
Yeah, so true. I agree 100%. There's like so much we could unpack in this topic, but I think that we did cover quite a bit as far as like finishing a book, finishing a project of any kind. It's about finding the grit, finding your perseverance, and in that act of persevering, finding like the ease and softness and joy, finding your childlike creativity and inspiration and energy, and all of that is there waiting for you. And perhaps you're just overthinking and stressing about it so much that those feelings of inspiration and creativity are being stifled. It's not that they're not there anymore. It's just that they're being like suppressed by all this stress and overthinking and anxiety or whatever. So try to take a deep breath and remember that what has brought you here, what has brought you to this place that you now find yourself in, you are capable of finishing this journey because you have come this far. Like everything that is behind you is proof that you can finish, and you can finish strong and finish with something that you are proud of, and that someday will be either sitting on your shelf, or perhaps you'll walk into a movie premiere watching your screenplay come to life before your eyes. Some really amazing things that you can visualize about the future of your work, but you have to do the work. You have to finish what you started in order to achieve that dream. So hopefully you guys got some good inspiration and motivation, encouragement out of this episode. If you did, give it a big thumbs up if you're on YouTube. If you're not on YouTube and you're on the other podcast platforms, give us a nice rating. We so appreciate that. We also really, really appreciate our patrons who make this possible. So if you get value out of this podcast, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show and help us keep this podcast alive and free of interruptions. Until next time,
stay stoked
and rock on.